And our final topic for tonight, and also a recurring bit, which is better. It's a little more obscure. I'm throwing it in here. I thought of it very last minute, but which is legit better? Not which do you hate more, but which would you prefer, Jim? Between just a game that offers out DLC, and I'm not even going to separate whether it's free or whether it's paid for, or games where they're clearly releasing quote unquote new versions of the games, and really all they're doing is maybe adding new characters. The best example, look at Street Fighter 2. After Street Fighter 2, how many different versions of that game came out? That a lot of them were, it's a little faster. Oh, it's a little faster and two more characters. It's a little like, there's been many, many games where I feel like had there been some version of DLC in the past, you could have kept the original engine and just kept building on it through patches, through whatever. Because obviously most modern games today, that's how they handle them. And it's pretty rare, except for sports titles, where you're just seeing the same engine being revamped over and over. So what do you prefer? Which one do you think is actually better? And moving forward, what do you think as far as how gaming should do it?
Okay. See, again, this is almost a bit of a caveat, but I think the best way that they do this, it would fall under revamped versions, but for the games that get the Game of the Year editions that have all the DLC with it. So, I mean, if it depends. Are you just going to talk about like on release, paying full price when it first comes out kind of deal?
Yeah. So
okay.
I do agree. Well, let me just say, yes, that literally combined both things. So that's kind of when you have a Game of the Year edition,
Singer!
It's a revamp, but it's with all the DLC. But if we're assuming day one, your little Jimmy Wimmy pants went out and bought a game.
In this day and age, doing it DLC wise would be better. Like, even Street Fighter 4 still wound up having like 4 fucking versions of full retail releases for Street Fighter 4. It had Street Fighter 4, it had Super Street Fighter 4, it had Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, I think, and had maybe Ultra Street Fighter 4? Something like that. It had a bunch of versions, besides the 3DS port and shit like that. Whereas Street Fighter 5 came out bare bones, which was its own sack of bullshit for $60, but they built up on it enough through the years through DLC, both paid and unpaid, to turn into a pretty good product. So, like, in this day and age, I would rather pay the $60 up front and just keep adding to it than having to pay $60 4 times for shit. And I kind of wish that these games, like, once they do these patches, would include a mode where you can go back to like a classic mode or like a release mode of the game kind of deal, which a lot of them really don't do. Like, once the new version's out, like, that's the version. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, you know better than I do, but like Warzone, whenever they update Warzone, it's not like you can go back to an older Warzone, right?
No, but usually the updates are really just because they're adding stuff. They're not changing anything major except for maybe adjustments of guns.
Okay, so yeah, I think overall just throwing DLC onto a game that you bought, obviously outside of the Game of the Year, which comes with everything, I think it's way more consumer friendly to just let people pick and choose what they want to add to the game. Now if it's like forced DLC to like keep current with the current meta and you have to pay the money, then that comes down to bullshit. But if it's, adding more characters or adding more modes that you might or might not use, if you make it optional, then I think DLC is way better then.
So yeah, like, I look at a perfect example would be go with all the major titles that keep doing DLC. So like your Grand Theft Autos. Look at Smash Brothers, the latest one. They keep adding the characters,
which you don't have to buy for Smash.
No, you absolutely you don't.
Right, even a better version, fucking No Man's Sky, which I think most of the DLC is free.
All of it's free so far, and that's what I'm saying, and that's why if I said free DLC, then it's a clear.
That's
winner.
a no-brainer. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and there's so many games that are adopting it. Even Call of Duty. Say what you will, the latest one. You still got a full campaign, you have a co-op, you have multiplayer, you have Warzone. But even if you didn't buy the game, Warzone is free to play. And every so often they release these crazy huge updates, which are annoying, but they allow you actually, even if you don't have the game, to play multiplayer for free. So you get a taste of the game. And so far, yeah, you don't pay, but they are making enough bank on the microtransactions for these battle seasons. And I might have like thrown $5 towards some of those things, like those in-game like dollars, so I can like unlock certain costumes or whatever.
Right.
As much as I think it's bullshitty, and yes, we all grew up loving games where it's like, I used to just work for my costumes. I agree with that 1,000,000%. But if you're telling me I can save myself from getting a shitty updated version of the game where it doesn't just keep getting released by having microtransactions that are completely optional, I'll go with that any day. I think the only thing that should ever continually update, unfortunately, is probably sports games. I get it. It's completely new rosters. They're trying to do...
There's no reason that these yearly sports games are all full price. They do it because they get away with it. But there's no reason that you couldn't release like one or... I'll give you two. I'll give you two a generation with like updated graphics and blah, blah, blah. But do 2 generation, then just keep updating the rosters and shit like that. Like, yeah, there's no reason for it.
And it is tough because they're... And as we've seen throughout the years, like, there are some years where it's like...
It's a big revamp.
Man, but year to year, you can have a really big jump, and all of a sudden they figured some shit out.
Right.
It is tough, and yeah, it's like... It goes back to what you said, though, like, even if it was a sports games, the only way they could make that work is if it was a 2-year cycle that you could definitely go back, if you did, like, a 2020 and 2021 combined, that you could go back and have the roster from 2020... and switch it between. So, once again, though, that's something I totally get. And if you're diehard into sports and that's your one game thing, whatever, that's your $60 a year.
Right. And there's also the thing where, like, I get the business side of it where a lot of these AAA game companies, they live and die off their yearly release titles like that. So, like, they have to release all these ones yearly to, like, stay afloat. Even though, it's also part of their business and blah, 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 where they probably... could make it so you don't have to live and die by these fucking yearly reskins and shit like that, but it's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I mean, from a practical sense, there's really no reason for it.
Like, even though I know you're diehard Street Fighter 2, as a kid, did it annoy you at all? How many different versions of 2? Like,
dude, I own like 10 versions of Street Fighter 2. I own 2 in Turbo on the Super Famicom. I have Championship Edition and Super on the Sega Genesis. I have Hyper on the Xbox. I have Ultra. Ultra Street Fighter 2 Xbox on the 360. I have Ultra on the fucking Switch. Like, there's so many versions. It's unnecessary.
But that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying, little young Jimmy Thumb Up His Ass Napoleon. When you were...
How dare you assume that Jimmy Thumb Up His Ass Old Napoleon doesn't exist, sir? Please, sir.
Like. Did you ever say, like, man, this is kind of, like, bullshit? Because I remember having this argument, and this probably is the spark of when I was a kid, because, I never understood. I'm like, oh, man, I got Mortal Kombat 2. I got Mortal Kombat 3. And then someone's like, oh, but I still have...
I have Ultra 3. Oh, I have 3 Trilogy.
Well, even that pissed me off. Don't even get me started about that. But the only difference I'll give credit there was Trilogy was that final like cap, and I didn't do any in between.
And that was the next console too. Like you had 3 and you had Ultra 3 on the same generation.
Yeah, exactly. Which I didn't do. Like I wasn't willing to buy because I was like, well, that's bullshit. But I had friends who would like you get into that argument of Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat. I'm like, you're still on 2 version 7 or whatever the fuck it was. Like. I was like, it's just, that's ridiculous. And, oh, now you have Tammy. That's real cool. Like, it just, I don't know. When you were young, even though you loved it, did you ever get annoyed by that? Or did you even buy multiple versions as a kid? Obviously, now you buy every version you can. But when you were a kid, did you just stick with one?
No, because, well, with Street Fighter, at least on the Genesis, there's the 2 versions. And the first one I had was Super because my dad brought that home one day. And then I eventually went and got Championship Edition because I was like, all right, I want to see what the difference is. And like my prize for a good report card, and God knows in my upbringing I wasn't allowed to have bad report cards, was I would be able to get a video game. Of course, it would be from the used section because God forbid you spend more than $30 on a game. But for all my childhood lockdown and abuse, but this is that was my pittance. I get a toy or I get a game for a good report card. So. I got...
That's a pretty damn good deal, though, Jim.
I can't complain.
That's a toy versus a game.
It's where all the bullshit that surrounds me comes from, Brian. So, I'm a product of my upbringing. So, yeah, I did get, Championship after I had Super, and I always liked Super more because it had more to it. But, yeah, I back then it didn't bother me. I didn't really think twice about it, to be honest with you.
Interesting. So, yeah, obviously, this is going more and more away, the chances of seeing Revamped, but we just wanted to throw it out there, especially since we have a lot of retro fans and people who I know are diehards. What do you guys think?
I'd really be shocked if anyone said maybe because it's a one-time thing and you can just plop down your $60 and you have the version you want. There's an argument there, but I just still think what are you going to wait for that version? God knows what even comes out, so I don't know.